Welcome, Jamieson Thomas, to our Mennello Museum virtual studio visits. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very glad to have you join us.
Thank you for including me. I'm excited.
Of course. We're really excited to get to learn more about your work and your processes. Would you begin by introducing us to your work and sort of what your process is?
I think what I'll do is quickly walk you through and then talk a little bit about my work.
Beautiful. Yes, so invite us into your studio. Thank you so much for having us.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you coming to visit my studio today. And what I've got you focused on at the top here are two paintings that I did in a series of stairwells to nowhere. But I didn't really know why I painted them. I was applying to graduate school. I had just finished a very large series of paintings on flowers, and I had sculptures and other pieces, and it was called The Language of Flowers. And I was looking in depth at what flowers meant to me and what they've meant through history. And so I started questioning myself and thinking, okay, I'm going to graduate school. They're going to ask me why I painted flowers, and they're going to think I was like Georgia O'Keeffe. And they're going to assume things because I'm a woman painting flowers, and that was not why I was painting them. And so I really needed to be able to answer that question. So I did the little stairwells sort of as a way of seeking and searching. And so I created them out of paper because they're flimsy, and it's really thoughts that are going off and sort of, you know, I'm seeking, I'm searching, but I'm also escaping from from all the things that have defined who I am through my life. So I was trying to find what meant things to me. So I went into symbolism a lot. And so that's what I showed at graduate school. I got in, but I got ripped apart. And I was told that my painting technique was fine and my thought process was fine, but I needed to break free of it and do anything but what I knew how to do. So I'm going to walk you around here, and I'm going to show you my first sculptures that I did when I was in graduate school. And I'm going to have to shift this up just a little bit so that I can show you the wire sculptures up here. And we were tasked with a project of finding a material to work with that was nothing like what we had ever done before. So as I was walking into school that day, I was in New York City. I walked by a dumpster and I saw this huge spool of wire. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be fun to play with that wire? And so I started out by doing portraits of everybody, which is exactly what I wasn't supposed to do. They were trying to get me away from observation and realism. And they wanted me to get more into concept thought and process. So I had to get away from doing faces and all that sort of stuff. I even have one of the faces up here, which is kind of fun. But I sat in my studio just at a loss because I'd been ripped apart and yet one more critique. And I started knitting. And I had knitted since I was a little girl. So it was very natural for me to start the process of weaving. And it was a way of weaving my thoughts, you know, and getting my head around it and creating a concrete form out of something that I just couldn't seem to grasp. And so that was the beginning of graduate school. And during school, I did a lot of other processes. I got into watercolor a lot. I'm going to bring you back around this way. And I did this whole series, which I didn't know where I was going with it. I actually was starting out with who am I and where did I begin? And I was brought up in a religious background. I went to church every week. And when I had children and I was teaching Sunday school class, I was asked a lot of questions that I never asked myself. And I started thinking that it starts in the beginning with the words of man, because man wrote our language. And when, you know, there are very few cultures where women wrote the language. So behind the black piece are every symbol in that I could find in the world to represent a faith, whether it was Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or, you know, whatever, although Buddhism isn't religion. But at any rate, I started with that. And so I was trying to deconstruct. And so I thought, okay, I'm going back to the beginning of the world and seeing light. I need to get out of the darkness of being held down by all this thought and just let my feelings flow. And so that's where this piece came in. And I did the, different watercolors, sort of studying different pieces. Those are hard to see, but just trying to break out. And then I was faced with having to do my my thesis project, and I was really struggling with where to go and what was I doing, and I was deconstructing. Oh, and actually, I should show a piece that I did just last year, but because I don't have any of these pieces left, I created a bunch of sculptures out of found plastic, and so I started really working with the elements that were just hanging around on the street, sort of like a Joseph Cornell or a Rauschenberg or anybody who works with found objects. And I thought, I really love the earth, and that's where it all begins. And so the root of it all is I'm going back to what I know, and what my mother, the way I could see my mom and spend time with her was to work in the yard or to work in her garden or to deal with the roses. And so I started realizing it's all about the earth and nurturing. And I could be nurtured by my mother if I hung out with her in the garden. And so after deconstructing, I started reconstructing. And so then I went back to doing the stairwell sort of pieces. And I don't have the large piece that I did last year. It was after graduate school, but these are based on sketches that I did as I deconstructed. So I deconstructed all that plastic, and I did all these hanging pieces, and I was sort of taking videos of myself walking through them and talking, and it was just a process to clear the mind and clear the thoughts. And then I used those photographs to build these paintings, which I really love. And I have a very, very large one that's 5 feet by 5 feet that is, it's sold right now. It's over at a doctor's office. But I absolutely love that piece, and I like it because it's bringing everything I've done and merging it together. And there's this knitting of the paintings into my thought process. And the last piece that I did was for my thesis, and it was knitting this plastic. So as you can hear, it sounds like the ocean. And I collected the plastic from beaches starting in Miami all the way to New York, because that's where I've lived. And I knitted a large blanket, and I called it the ripple effect. And I collected the plastic, washed it, and then I wrote stories of the beginning of the earth, and destruction stories, and stories of great events, floods, flood myths. And so I got into, the whole process of thinking through how we were supposed to nurture the earth, and how indigenous cultures left us with these great myths and lessons about how to care for the earth. And I thought that's where my work really needed to go. And so this is taking, I went from an industrial material with the wire, and I am the human hand again. So it's a human-made product in human hands, but creating these ethereal vessels that represent space on earth, and that space in between things. And so then I took it to the worst material we've made, because of course the metal will dissolve and go back into the earth. The plastic is with us forever. Microplastics will be around. It is our legacy that we will leave. Earth will survive, although we will not, because Earth knows how to regenerate itself. And we need to work with the earth more. And so that's really where all of my art has taken me. So at any rate, this was the last piece that I created. It's I did it during the pandemic, and it's a huge sort of dome that I thought I could sit within and really process the thought about, how did we get here? How did we bring ourselves to this point of, creating our own devastation here on earth, and what can I do about it, and what can my art say? So let's see. And then I created all these, let's see, I'm gonna have to lift this again, but these are photographs of the myth blanket floating in the water, and then with lights and natural experiences, moments that where you had something that was happening that wasn't what it appeared to be. And so I called those my myth photos, which tied into the myths of the indigenous peoples that were written on the blankets. So the most recent thing that I did with this was an installation down at City Arts, and I did some sculptures, and I did this as a volcano, actually, a human eruption, sort of looking at that Samsula trash dump, and it's just growing and growing, and if you get to the top of it, you can actually see the ocean. And so I thought it's our own little volcano. And so I reconstructed this. So I take my work and I regenerate it the way that the earth can regenerate itself, in a way. And so that's kind of where my thought process is. And then the last thing that I'm doing, and I forgot to bring them back in the studio because they're being photographed, but I can show you one. And it's the sort of the merging of the natural world with the construct of humanity. And these are little studies, and I do lots of them. And before I go into my big white canvas that's over there, and it's daunting to look at it. And I think I need to do more small paintings so that I can be ready for it. But I'll leave it to you now to ask me questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing us through your studio, through your practice, through all of the disciplines that you explore. And it's very interesting for me to see just how vast your interest in materials are, and your ability to play with them and to get your own ideas and stories woven into them. Yeah, the weaving is such a huge part that I took away from your work, that I love to see the weaving of the storytelling, spinning of the yarn, and in many different ways, both possible religiously, but then also personal as well. This work is very personal for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think as an artist, that's what I learned more than anything when I was in graduate school, is that I needed to tell my story. That's the only story I have to tell. I can't tell the story of anybody else. I can only speak to who I am and the way that I was created, and I am a product of my past. And I think I mentioned to you in passing that I worked on a very large project of my great aunt Amy, who was a composer in the early 20th century. And that really inspired me a lot as well. We did a wonderful project with a local musician and a writer, to come up with the mysterious life of Amy Thompson McKean. And reading through her journals and looking at her music made me understand that I'm a lot closer to my past than I realized. And it's in the genes, whether you like it or not. You just have to learn how to process it and how to make it fit the way you think today.
Right. And that it's a very interesting way that you went about that project too, incorporating it into your artwork, and you're still thinking about it, right?
Oh, all the time. I mean, it's a daily process. I'm forever drawing ideas. I write a lot, which is interesting for an artist. My journals are filled with as much writing as they are with drawings. I was teaching a class to my Design 1 students yesterday, and I was trying to show them how I work through mark making, and I take ideas from little elements. I pick up seaweed that's dried on the beach, and I'll do little patterns of it, and I want to try to incorporate that into these new pieces that I'm doing. And I'm going to take some of the heirlooms that I've been given that I don't know what to do with. I've got 20 Bibles from people going all the way back to the 1700s, and I'm going to deconstruct those somehow into the art and tell a story. I don't know where it's going to go, but I have to write what I'm thinking, and then I start drawing and pulling off of that. And I might take a page and work with that page and look for words that inspire and speak to something that I've read or learned about my past.
Yeah, it's really interesting that words specifically in language play such a huge part even in the visual or the tactileness of your work. There's still
Mhm.
language that's coming into it that's so interesting and important to you. Um, and it helps you speak and bring together all of these beautiful notions of nurturing and the environment and people taking care of the space that we live in and
Mhm.
in many different ways, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you are currently working on these pieces that are incorporating your great aunt's work, which are very interesting. They're collages, assemblages. Are you going to be building them up off the wall, or are they still going to stay flat, do you think?
I have a feeling they're going to come out at you.
Okay.
I think that it's important because my great aunt went through a lot in her life. She fought for the women's rights. She was a suffragist. She was hanging out with Harlem Renaissance poets up in Harlem at a time when white Victorian women didn't do that. And it brought some difficulties for her. And she was eventually committed for not behaving herself as a white woman of that time. And it was only for a short time, but it changed her dramatically. She was, we believe, given shock treatments, and she was never able to write music again. So for 60 years, 84 years, her music sat in a box. And then I was given that. And I feel like there's a power and a force with that. And it can't just be on a flat canvas. It's got to come at you. I mean, and her music is powerful. And I actually let some people use her music for a video recently, a PSA about wearing masks, because I thought she would have appreciated that. And it fits, her thought process. And so it's kind of weird because I feel like she's right here with me now. And she was a gift that was given to me. And I think that in art, we're given the gift of observation. And if we look closely enough, we see what we're supposed to talk about.
That's a beautiful way to really describe like what I'm seeing with your process is that close observation and of course the deconstruction and the reconstruction of what you're seeing in the world, whether it's the earth itself, the plastics we're using, family, caring in general. I think that's a really beautiful way to approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely, the crux of everything. And it's interesting because even with my own family, I've learned so much from my children and their consideration for the world around them. And I was not as good about nurturing the earth until I had children, and we had a garden together and we worked in the garden, and we had a wonderful neighbor who taught us how to have a huge garden in Dallas when we lived there. And the kids have carried that with them, and they both have gardens now. And, they're the ones who brought me to questioning faith. And they have taught my husband and me how to see the world through a very different lens.
Wonderful. And one last thing that I wanted to ask to really tie everything together has to do with the installation, the moving installation that began as a blanket and it keeps growing. It's up to 15 pieces now. Is that right?
Yes, it is. And it was really fun because when I was installing it in New York, in a gallery, a friend of mine said, I have some dancers who saw your installation and they would like to do a piece with it. And then, and one of them had been with ABT, another one had been with the North Carolina Ballet. And we did a piece with the value of water. And that was sort of a conceptual piece that was in the gallery. And they danced within the plastic. They actually brought it in from the street. We put it up on the wall, and then they danced and moved within it. And then they went and found the water. And the very last photo is one of the dancers looking at that water in a little tiny glass jar because it's so precious to us. It's what we need to survive. And so it was just so cool to see how working with other artists could take my work to a different level. And so that's what really encouraged me to keep expanding the body of work and reprocessing the thoughts and, creating the dome as a place where people could come and think about what it was like to live through COVID and this human constructed problem. Really, it's our own doing. If we had not gone too close to where bats are, we wouldn't be dealing with this problem. If we didn't encroach into coyotes' spaces, we wouldn't have them all over Winter Park in Orlando right now. We built a little too much into those dens, and now we are the animals in our cages during COVID. We're stuck inside, and they're out there looking in at us going, huh, how do you feel now? Right?
Right.
But at any rate, yeah, that's how I'm revisiting this now, and I feel like we've created our own traps for ourselves, and we've got to think about how to process that and get out. And so I have to figure out how I'm going to build a ring to bring out this huge dome. I mean, it's really big. When you look at this, it's I don't know if you can see just how big that is, but
Wow.
I think it's 7 feet across and 7 feet tall. And so my thought is that I would have people record within my space and talk about what they felt during that time of being isolated. So that's next. We'll see.
Well, it's really amazing that you get these collaborations out of it, again, with the language and speaking and to bringing in more personal experiences, both artists, people coming in. To me, you're talking about this cage, and you've started with the metallic cages with the wire, but they're still woven together. So eliciting ideas of comfort and care and warmness, and then transferring that to the plastic, something that's really not supposed to be in that realm, but is the kind of the home that we've built for ourselves, and that cage that we've built for ourselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I very much appreciate everything that you've brought to us. I really enjoy your work and speaking with you about it. Is there anything else you would like to add before we end today?
Just to ask people to pay attention and really think about what we are doing as humans, and to respect all the creatures out there on the earth, because I think of anthropomorphism and how we all carry a lot of the same elements. Interestingly, most plants especially know how to take care of themselves and process their own light, their own food through synthesis, and that sort of thing. So just to consider all of that. And I don't have anything specific with a date that you can watch for me, but check my website out and come visit us at McCrae Art Studios. We'd love to see anybody come by here anytime. We've got 22 artists in our space, and it's really a lively, exciting space when we can all be together again. For right now, we're going to be virtual.